Hey everybody, my name is Phil Stamper. It's time for another Independent Wrestling Roundup. So excited to be with you. I'm tired. I'm still recovering from Mania week, y'all. Tired. But it's okay, lots of action. Let's go ahead and share what's going on with IWTV. Of course, a lot of the things that happened during WrestleMania week last week, you can now see on IWTV.live this week, already out. Brand new episode of New South Action Clash and a new event from Absolute Intense Wrestling on Wednesday. A brand new episode of Limitless Wrestling's The Road and Paradigm Pro Wrestling's UWFI Contender Series. Then on Friday, a full event from Limitless Wrestling, and on Saturday, an event from H2O Wrestling. Then over on Fight TV, already out this week, a new episode from Ring of Honor. And on Tuesday, a full event from Rocky Mountain Pro. On Wednesday, episodes from WrestleBration and an event from Catalyst Wrestling. And then on Thursday, events from Devotion Championship Wrestling and Atomic Revolutionary Wrestling. Tonight is Ohio Valley Wrestling in Louisville, Kentucky. Then on Thursday, you can see action in Georgia with WWA 4, in Rhode Island with Extreme Wrestling Alliance, out of Tennessee with 127 Pro Wrestling, and out of Utah with Devotion Championship Wrestling. Then on Friday, out of Alabama, we have Pro South Wrestling, out of Florida, Atomic Revolutionary Wrestling, out of Illinois, Chicago Style Wrestling, out of Indiana, EHF, out of Kentucky, Kentucky Elite Pro Wrestling, out of Maine, Limitless Wrestling, out of Massachusetts, Chaotic Wrestling, out of Michigan, Horror Slam and New Breed Pro Wrestling, out of New Jersey, Monster Factory Pro Wrestling, out of Ohio, Future Great Wrestling, out of Oklahoma, Wrestling for a Cause, and out of Tennessee, Resolute Wrestling and Southern Wrestling Federation, and out of Texas, Knucklehead Championship Wrestling and Texoma Pro. Then on Saturday the 17th, out of Alabama, New South Pro Wrestling and Revolt Pro Wrestling. Out of Arizona, Arizona Wrestling Federation. Out of Arkansas, Revolutionary Wrestling Entertainment. Out of California, Fist Combat. Out of Connecticut, Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling. Out of Delaware, 1CW Pro Wrestling. Out of Florida, Destiny Combat Championship Wrestling and World Extreme Wrestling. Out of Georgia, KLT Promotions, Renegade Championship Wrestling, and Viral Pro Wrestling. Out of Illinois, Chicagoland and Guerreros Azteca Wrestling, Lucha Libre Boom, all coming together for an event. Out of Indiana, Paradigm Pro and Showcase of Champions. Out of Michigan, Experience Pro Wrestling and Pro Wrestling Havoc, as well as Ultimate Championship Wrestling and UWE Pro Wrestling. Out of Mississippi, Battle Zone Championship Wrestling. Out of Missouri, ICWF Pro Wrestling Entertainment and New Breed Wrestling. Out of New Jersey, Hardcore Hustle Organization, otherwise known as H2O. Also, Titan Championship Wrestling, as well as UWC with 2 events. Out of North Carolina, AIWF Mid-Atlantic, American Lucha Wrestling, and Ring Wars Carolina. Out of Ohio, Ascend Pro Wrestling and Wrestling in Respect. Out of Oklahoma, Wrestling for a Cause. Out of Pennsylvania, East Coast Pro Wrestling and Prospect Pro Wrestling. Out of South Carolina, Battle Zone Wrestling. Also out of South Carolina, Premier Wrestling Experience. Out of Tennessee, Imperial Pro Wrestling, Southern Pride Championship Wrestling, Tennessee All Pro Wrestling, Tennessee Legacy Wrestling, and Tennessee Wrestling Alliance. Out of Texas, Austin Wrestling Revolution. Also, Christian Wrestling Federation, Knucklehead Championship Wrestling, Metroplex Wrestling, Texas Wrestling Federation, and Undisputed Pro Wrestling. Also out of Utah, Devotion Championship Wrestling. Then on Sunday, from Alabama, New South Pro Wrestling. Out of Florida, Deathmatch Metal Fest. Out of Indiana, Asylum Wrestling Revolution. Out of North Carolina, Carolina All-Star Wrestling and First Time Ever. Out of South Carolina, WrestleForce. Out of Tennessee, Revolutionary Wrestling Alliance and School of Morton. And out of Texas, AAPW. A lot of action heading your way. Wow. Last week was exhausting. Mania week, y'all. Mania week. Well, that's been it for the Independent Wrestling Roundup this week. I'll see you all very, very soon.